Hello, and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is where we talk to some of the most tantalizing, scrumptious, and tasty comedy individuals across the comedy globe. Now, today's guests are the fantastic Mark Broadhead, the best heckler in all of London, and we have the #1 Kiwi comic in London, apart from well, I reckon he's better than Card Ninja, Sully O'Sullivan, who has the first name of Sully from Top Boy.
Kia ora.
That's the intro. Yay!
Go intro.
Did you guys like that intro?
I would like to formally apologise to Javier Harquin, otherwise known as the Card Ninja, and make it absolutely clear that I did not write that intro. Also, I'm not even in London at the moment, so it's clearly not my fault.
You're based in the north, am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's right. So I am doing this from my home office in North Manchester.
Ah, okay. So, Mark, be careful. It's North Manchester or North Gunchester.
yeah. It's people, when people hear my accent around here, say I get a delivery to the front door, I come out with this accent and I do get a really like where did your life go wrong kind of reaction.
Yes. What you said, that is that like comedians, and you say like when someone gets surprised that you do comedy, they ask you.
Oh no! They're just surprised that a New Zealander is living in North Manchester.
Are you being held there against your will?
I'm not presently, but I do have a very I have a toxic relationship with UK immigration. It does seem to swing in between what the hell are you doing here and we don't want you to leave. So yeah, there might be a bit of that.
Cool.
Do me and Mark have the look of UK immigration?
If you are deep undercover.
I think, yeah, this jacket is a bit more like walking in a park, feeding the ducks. And Mark, how would you describe your look?
Office-like. So are you cold there, Marvin? Are you going to take your jacket off, or are you hedging your bets? You might leave early or something, or?
Oh, I just came out. Here we go. no. Here we go.
Well, I feel we should play some music in the background as the jacket gets unzipped.
We'll put some After Effects on for that.
Easy. Calm down, guys. So, Sully, tell us a bit about how you became a comedian in Manchester. Did you swim all the way from New Zealand to get to Manchester, or what was it?
So when I started performing overseas, settled on the UK, I was based in London for about 2.5 years, but felt, I was, sort of sick of London, basically. And so it was time to move on. And at that point, I didn't know whether I was heading back to New Zealand, I was heading elsewhere in the world. One thing left to another, and I just slowly ended up creeping north, sort of spent 6 months in Nottingham, couple of years in Chester, and then across to Manchester. So far it's been a good fit.
Okay. And what drew you to the Mancunian scene? Because I hear right now a lot of things are happening in the north. You got Hot Water, La Fienda, you got like Have a Word, like what's going on up north?
Yeah, so it's weirdly, being based out of Manchester works for me, but part of it is like say the northern scene as opposed to just Manchester itself. So geographically, Liverpool's only an hour away, Leeds is only an hour away, Sheffield over the Pennines an hour with change. Hull Comedy Lounge is 2 hours down the M62, which is a fairly straight run. So Manchester's a good base to get round to all of those different places and those different clubs without sort of just being reliant on gigging in the one city.
But I've heard, and this is from so many comics I hear travel up north, like Don Biswas. He says that up north you guys pay so much more than down south.
So it is something I've never quite figured out, the mathematics of the London scene. I think what it does go back to is there was a time where acts would double up, triple up, quadruple up on a Saturday night in London. And so because of that, clubs could pay a bit less because that wasn't going to be your one stop that evening, doing that one gig. Whereas up north, just because of the geography, yes, you can double, but it's a lot harder to triple. So if you're doubling, say you might be opening in Manchester, closing in Liverpool. But it'd be, you'd really have to get logistics right to squeeze another show in between those two. People do it, particularly if they're playing at one club that maybe has an early show and a late show, and they're squeezing another one, in between. But it's a lot trickier. And so if a gig's going to be your one stop for the evening, then it sort of has to be willing to commensurate you at the fact that it's your one stop for that evening.
Of course, yeah. It's that makes sense. Now, one little thing I want to ask. So you're from New Zealand, and how is the humour different to the north of England?
I've always felt that comedy-wise, it's there can often be a bigger difference between gigging in a big city and a small town in the same country than sometimes across two different countries. I've been, I've gigged a lot in Europe as well. Last time I gigged in Zagreb, I basically didn't even need to change my set. Their knowledge of international going on is, nice and wide. Their English is great, probably better than certainly some Scousers. And so in that respect, I didn't need to change my set much. But if you were gigging somewhere smaller, it doesn't matter where in what country that smaller town is, then people are often less up on world events. Why? Because it affects them less. I mean, if you live in a little idyllic village in North Wales, then you don't need to switch on the news as much. It's just going to depress you. Doesn't affect your life. Your life is idyllic. The village is great. And of course, in that little town, they all tend to know each other. So, you're going to get much bigger laughs out of, talking about something much more microcosmic than you are about, making jokes about big world events that just don't impact their lives. So I've always felt there's a bigger difference in comedy audiences between big cities and small towns more often than there are between countries.
Okay. And
can I butt in with a question, Marvin? Is that all right?
Yeah, go on.
Go ask Sully if he's got a New Zealand comedian that people listening to this wonderful podcast might not have heard of, or may well have heard of, that you would mention as who was influential in your career, if we call it a career.
Oh, right. That's an interesting one. So in terms of actual influence, would probably be someone who doesn't perform much these days, is much more known as an anti-youth suicide campaigner. And that would be Mike King. So Mike King, at one point, this is back in New Zealand when other comedians were just, hoping to get paid, and no one was really making a living. And there was Mike selling out, the Wellington Opera House on tour. At that point, career-wise, he was the host of the one stand-up TV show we had in New Zealand, and he was at that point on another level to every other act in the country, really. Like I said, these days, life takes you in strange directions. I don't know when the last time he actually performed stand-up was. Life is a journey. And as I said, he's now predominantly in New Zealand known as a anti-youth suicide campaigner. But certainly in those early days, I mean, one thing, and this is one thing about smaller scenes, is it's can be much more easy to network. So you can find yourself performing with someone right at the other end of the spectrum career-wise in a fairly short amount of time. So when Mike was warming up for one of his national tours, he'd often do small gigs in more out-of-the-way places. And he would get me to support him as in do the opening warm-up, et cetera, on those smaller stops. So he gave me some great stage time very early on. So as I said, that's probably something that wouldn't come about in a much bigger comedy scene, that you would see a new act like what they do and go, hey, you can come support me on some tour warm-up dates.
Yes.
No,
they would more middle of their career, someone already that trusted.
Yes, that's right. Someone who was tapped to really break through, be the next big thing, as opposed to the new kid on the block that you think might maybe go somewhere.
Taking a risk. Wow.
Yeah.
What a legend.
What if you do better than them? What if you do better than the headline?
Oh, what if you do better? Well, look, this is, I mean, to a certain extent, that's always I say it's always a risk. I'm not sure that it is, because if people, it's an unlikely occurrence, because if people buy tickets for a show, they're there to see a particular act. So they can appreciate the warm-up act, but they're there to see the headliner. That's what they're literally waiting for. So it's probably a bigger risk that an audience turn around and go, "Oh, who's this guy?" There are actually certain things you can do to mitigate that, such as if you have the headline act introduce the opening act over the microphone, something like that. Some people will get the headliner to go out and literally, warm up the audience and then introduce the support act. That can be a little bit dangerous, because what you're doing then is you're putting the act they've come to see out in front of them and then taking them away again. Yes. Which, can, an audience might actually resent. One thing getting the headline act to introduce the support act over the microphone does do, though, is it gives them a certain amount of endorsement. In wrestling, they would call that a rub. So you're almost getting a rub from the headliner at that point. You're getting positive vibes by association. It's. I think a headliner would really have to screw up for the opening act to have a genuinely better gig than them. It would be possible if the headliner turns up drunk or something like that. It's certainly possible, and I'm sure it has happened somewhere along the lines. But it is, I would say it's few and far between.
There's a lot of pre-screening people turning up, though, isn't there? You go to see Eddie Izzard, you've probably watched a few videos, you might have seen his last show. You're looking forward to a callback to the last show.
I would say it's even more than I would call it a filter. Bill Bailey actually talks about it. He says one of the ironies is that the bigger you become as a stand-up, often the less hard you need to work on stage, because people going to see Bill Bailey are not only going to see Bill Bailey, they're going to see the type of humor that Bill Bailey does. Yes. So the audience it's not like being on just a random name on a Saturday night where you have to please an audience that may not, for lack of a better way to put it, be your type of audience. Yes. You don't need to be as broad-based. And the audience on a random Saturday night comedy club it's a much more mixed audience, different age groups, different tastes in comedy, all that kind of thing. Yes. Whereas if you're going to see a big name comedian, then apart from the few people, there's the odd person who's going to be dragged along by somebody else, or someone who goes, I'm going to see this person just because I know they're on the tally and doesn't know anything else about them. Aside from them, the majority of the audience are all there to see the type of humor that headline act does. And so in that respect, it should be easier.
Is there any? So two questions here. Could you clarify what a rub is? And
Yeah, it sounds dodgy now. I'm gonna get I'm gonna get HR on my ass.
Could you show us?
It's something you shouldn't do in a green room unless the door is locked. No. So the firstly, I'm clarifying that right now. I'm not even waiting for the second question. So a rub in wrestling terms is if you get a wrestler who's really big, and then you put someone else either potentially in a tag team match with them. Well, now the fans are all cheering. They were always going to cheer for the big name they know, but by osmosis, for lack of a better way to put it, they're also going to cheer for the lesser known wrestler. And so that would be an example of getting the rub. It also works if, say, you've got what they call a big face, the good guy in wrestling, and a lesser known heel, the bad guy. Well, the heel's job is to be booed by the audience. Well, he's or she is automatically going to be booed just because they are being the bad person to the good guy. So that'd be. I hope I've done an adequate job of explaining what a rub is without involving HR.
I think I've got it now. I'm now going to watch it at home. Now, no,
in the dark with the doors locked.
Yes.
Private browsing.
Now, one of the list of questions I put on, like, who's a comic that you don't like but you can appreciate the work. Who's like a comic? You mentioned like comedians have their own sort of audience, but who's a comic that you're like, I can't stand this fucker, but I respect his. I respect his. He's good at what he does. It really isn't for me, but you respect what he does.
Wow, do it.
So, without going quite that far, and you know what, I figure if I'm going to upset one person, I might as well upset an entire group of people. Which sounds as though my answer is going to be worse than it is. So, a type of act that I appreciate the skill, and it's a skill I even wish I had, but just doesn't do it for me for some reason, is impressionists. I've never been particularly entertained by impressionists. I can appreciate the skill. I can even appreciate the level of observation that goes on, or that must go on to truly nail an impression, but I'm personally just not entertained by it. And as I said, it's even a skill I wish I had. I wish that if I was telling a joke and I name dropped a famous person in that joke, that was presumably relevant to the joke, that I could then deliver the next line with the perfect intonation of that said celebrity, and the audience would appreciate that fact. I even wish I had that skill. Yet at the same time, for some reason, and I'm not even sure why if I could tell you why, I myself have never found myself entertained by impressionists. Just not my thing.
Okay. Could you do one of Xi Jinping, please?
If the Chinese government weren't already listening to the Zoom call, then they definitely are now.
What did you ask, Mark?
Can we get one of Arnie?
What? My best Austrian Arnold Schwarzenegger impression.
Yes,
well, I suppose that's just I've never done an Arnold Schwarzenegger joke, and I probably won't because my "I'll be back" is just not convincing. There is Commando with the "Where's Sully? I let him go." Great line from Commando.
Oh, it's fantastic! It's a great film. Was that the one where he has that charm lady as daughter or something, and he goes, "Come on, Bennett! Come on, Bennett!"
Good with actors, actors, actresses. But yes, I believe that's correct.
Yeah, it's Commando, and that's a funny name for a film, isn't it? You're going to go, I'm going Commando.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the term commando was associated with not wearing boxer shorts at that point. you know, or maybe it was, and they thought some people would turn up because they're going to see Arnold not wearing boxer shorts. I'm not sure. Maybe it works both ways.
I mean, he said you wear pretty skimpy ones, didn't he? To be fair.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I don't think anything that would stop him from making the film.
Yes.
No, I don't want to cause any beef between you guys, but so we got North and South banter, but is there any North and South banter in New Zealand? Where are you guys from?
Where are you from, Sully? Where's home?
I'm from Wellington, but all my family are from the deep south. In fact, they're so far deep south. I did a Spates commercial back in the day. The Southern
good on you,
man.
mate.
Yeah, so I was even cast as a Southern man on more than one occasion.
Right. And you're not truly a Southerner. You did a Spates advert.
Yeah. Well, this is so. If you get a beer commercial, then yes, you get paid for the commercial. But what you really want is for them to buy your drinking rights.
Oh,
so
wow.
if you're in a series of commercials for the same alcohol manufacturer, for the same beer brewer, then they may buy your drinking rights. So what that means is every time you go into a bar or a nightclub or any other type of liquor establishment, if their beer is on sale, that's the one you have to drink. Now, if you go into a bar and they don't have that beer, you're allowed to buy a substitute. So that's what you really want. And one of the mainstays of the Spates commercials at the time, they had bought his drinking rights, despite the fact he lived in Sydney. Yeah, they didn't sell Spates in Sydney at the time. Like it was, he was on to a great thing there. Almost called it a scam. I don't think that's quite fair, but he was on to a good.
Well, Sully, my hometown's Hamilton, and we have Waikato, which is a bitter sort of beer, and it's brewed in Auckland. So hopefully,
which you're probably still bitter about.
Yes.
Hamilton, otherwise known as Hamiltron, H-Town, City of the Future. That's almost renamed it Waikato City because Hamilton is so shit. They thought the best bet of getting people to visit Hamilton was by getting them to visit Hamilton without realizing they were going to Hamilton.
Is there beef between your towns? Is there?
Nah. New Zealand's too small to really have too many towns that have beef. I think the closest thing to beef between anywhere in New Zealand, maybe a little bit between the mainland is the South Island call themselves. So the North Island would be the big brother to the South Island, just in terms of population. So but that's a little bit one-way traffic. You probably get people in the South Island going, the South Island's better, and people going from the North Island going, yeah, good point, well made. And aside from that, it's just everybody else versus Auckland.
Yes,
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Oh, what is
the term Jaffa?
Yeah.
Oh, what's the beef with the Aucklands?
Well, just because Auckland's a big city, so it's a bit like people taking the piss out of London.
Chelsea, isn't it?
The big smoke. Auckland's the big smoke. So the term for, or the derogatory term for an Aucklander is Jaffa, which is short for just another fucking Aucklander.
That's good. I'll remember that.
Yes.
Yep. Now, if you ever need to look disparaging, use a disparaging term for an Aucklander. There you have it, Jaffa.
My manager's from there, so I'll mention it too.
Now you know. Well, more to the point, even if he's not from Auckland itself, if he's just from anywhere in the North Island, it'll still work because that will just annoy him more. Like, for instance, if he is from Hamilton, you call him a Jaffa, that will annoy him far more than if he was from Auckland and you called him a Jaffa.
Now, this is a question to both of you guys. How is it? What are the advantages and disadvantages of being a foreigner in the UK? I should say.
Well, is this still a comedy?
I sound like you.
Advantages of being foreign. I don't know. Is it? I think it would be totally different for Sully, I would suspect, than me in London, because when I lived outside London, people had never met another New Zealander. And they wanted to know if I knew their relatives that had moved to New Zealand. Whereas now, it's just, it's effectively instead of that, just another fucking Aucklander. It's just another New Zealander, isn't it? Coming over here. I suppose years ago you would have lived in Earl's Court. Now you're in Hammersmith. Oh, how times have changed.
Yeah, it is. So it's in terms of the comedy side of things, it's a double-edged sword in that if someone wants to internationalize a bill, well, then I automatically do that by being, from the other side of the world. But it also means that, when they make those decisions, to a certain extent, they're pigeonholing you. And I once had a booker call me up and say, "Oh, we're going to have to take this gig out the diary." And I was like, "Why?" And he said, well, we've already got an Australian on the bill. and I was like, "You do know I'm from a different country?" And he was like, "Yeah, but
You say that's racist.
I didn't attempt to pull the race card, so to speak. But yeah. I mean, it's very rare that I'm on a bill with another New Zealander. If I am, then majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, one of us will be emceeing. Because what a book has done is they've gone, "I need a good MC. This person's a good MC. Book them in," and then booked in a range of acts without giving any more consideration to where the MC is from, which is kind of fair to a certain extent. I mean, when I'm emceeing or hosting, it's not unusual for me not to ever get round to mentioning where I'm from. I'm much more interested in the audience. It's kind of my job. But yeah, I probably gig with another New Zealander maybe twice a year, and that'll be out of that'll be out of a couple of hundred gigs. So.
There you go.
Marvin, I've got to apologise, and Sully, I've got to go for another meeting.
No worries, man.
I've got the day job thing.
No worries, man. Mark, thanks for coming on.
Such an interruption, though. The day job, such an interruption to my loving of comedy. And Sully, keep in touch, and I would love to see you in Edinburgh next year.
Yeah. It'd be good to see you up there, mate.
Free tickets, just leave them at the counter.
Yeah. We'll sort it out.
And Mark's an accountant, so he can help you with your figures. Do you have a deal?
Yes. Well, now that I know that.
Quite often comedians worry about what to do with their tax losses, and I'm sure I can help you with that.
Yeah, one thing comedians are not well known for is their ability when it comes to admin. So
it was great seeing you guys, and good luck. Nice day.
Mark.
See you guys
later.
Cheers.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, he's a regular audience member at my comedy shows in London. He is a very good heckler, talented heckler.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with getting having a podcast where you talk about comedy. So it makes sense to have both the comedians and the regular hecklers on the same podcast. Should be done more.
That's true. Well, it would be funny with one of those big videos where you get some. James Loveridge, he had a video where some guy threw a glass at him. Wouldn't it be funny to have them on a podcast?
Well, yeah, I mean,
maybe
obviously throwing the podcast live would be tricky. Throwing the glass live on the podcast might be tricky. Of course, Bobby Mayer went viral recently with a video of him having tracked down a heckler after 10 years and confronting him in his place of work, which was quite amusing.
Oh, that was brilliant. I think we should do that more.
Yeah. It would change the game a little if hecklers realised there were potential, internet-based consequences.
Now, I think you went to the Edinburgh Fringe last year, and I think I did as well. What were your thoughts on it as a whole? Because I spoke to Tom Little, and I'm going to put the episode up with him later on in the week. But he says that he's become more and more cynical of the Fringe the more he's done it. And he says that he may as well gig in London if he wants to get contact with the agents rather than go up in Edinburgh, because every time he emails them, they say they're too busy.
I certainly don't think that the Edinburgh Fringe is the great networking opportunity that it once was. Only not saying it's not good for networking, but there's so many other options out there. There's people who have become very big without ever having done an Edinburgh Fringe run. It used to be once upon a time there was only sort of really one route, and that involved getting seen at the Edinburgh Fringe, getting the offer on the table from a production company, and then hopefully making that big project that you'd always wanted to make. Whereas now you've had people like Limmy, the Scottish act, who sat in his bedroom, did one-person sketches, filmed very basically, and ended up with a TV show contract, I think before he'd ever done a live gig. So the days where there was only one way to go about things in terms of navigating a comedy career, I think of technology, social media, etc., YouTube even, have changed all of that.
Yeah. And what's it called? I think Constantine Kissing put out a post. Do you know Constantine Kissing and Francis Foster?
Oh, yes, of course.
They're notorious and famous trigonometry guys. What should I call them? I call them famous. And he put up a post saying, stop doing the Edinburgh Fringe. He says that it's all about online stuff.
Look, so when people ask me about doing Edinburgh Fringe, they're like, I'm thinking about doing Edinburgh Fringe. What's the first thing I should do? And I say the first thing you should do is figure out why you're doing the Edinburgh Fringe. Because unless you know what your goals are, you can't possibly work towards them. So if you are going to the Edinburgh Fringe, hoping to win an award, etc., then you'll probably go for one of the most well-known venues. You'll mortgage your house to get the deposit, and you'll go for broke. If you're a newer act and you're going up to Edinburgh Fringe just to cram 6 months or 12 months worth of stage time into 1 month, that is, and using the day job to fund that, that's a completely realistic goal. If you're going to Edinburgh Fringe to make money, and people do, this is something that's overlooked, is that some acts go to the Fringe and they do make money. Then again, you'll be going about the Fringe a different way. So you'll be going for the best venue you can get for the least amount of money, because you want to keep your outgoings low. You'll be putting on a show that is not necessarily about impressing the industry, about attracting audience, and they aren't necessarily the same things. And that will also affect your branding and what you are or aren't willing to pay in terms of publicity. One thing that I will say as a negative is that for too long, acts have been almost, I don't want to say brainwashed, but convinced that it's okay to lose vast amounts of money at the Fringe. That simply shouldn't be the case. And you sometimes hear people say, oh, but everybody loses money at the Fringe. Well, obviously, everybody can't lose money. That's like saying, we had a poker game on Thursday. Oh, who won? Oh, none of us. We all lost. No, it doesn't work like that. Like, the money's going somewhere. So if you're saying the acts aren't making money, then maybe the venues are making money. If you're saying the venues aren't making money, then maybe the landlords are making money. Saying it's not the landlords, then it's the council. But the money's going somewhere, and the acts should be getting their fair share of the pie. And some acts definitely are, and unfortunately, other acts have been allowed themselves to be convinced that it's okay to go up there, lose vast amounts, and as Constantine has pointed out, that's no longer necessary, even if you're trying to make that big step up to the next level.
Yeah, that's true. That's that's brilliant. That's gone on a lot more. You've put it there like one of those life coach courses or whatever. Like they like Tony Robbins makes a lot of money, but
Tony Robbins makes a lot of money doing courses telling people how they can make a lot of money. When Tony Robbins has figured out the best way to make a lot of money is getting other people to pay him so he could tell them how to make a lot of money. Whether those other people ever make a lot of money is kind of irrelevant to Tony Robbins. He's just made a lot of money.
And it's funny with that as well, because even if people do well in that, he can if he's got so many people going to the courses, he's bound to have someone that's going to make something out of themselves, and then he gets to
Yeah,
put
and
it
then
as a
he can use
testimonial.
that as put that person on the next billboard, put them on the screen behind him. So and so is now CEO of such and such, and it's just builds and builds.
Now, what for yourself, when you what are your thoughts on do you go up there to sharpen material or test ideas out?
So I'll be honest. I fall into the making money category in terms of how I go about the fringe. So I mean, this year, possibly to my own detriment, I didn't even bother setting up press releases because the show that I wrote it because it was a show that I would enjoy performing. I wrote it because I believed it was a show that a certain sector of audiences would enjoy going to watch. But I didn't think it was a very industry show. It was called A Complete Idiot's Guide to New Zealand. As it turns out, not only did I enjoy performing it, not only did audiences really enjoy coming and see it, certainly based on ticket sales, but to my surprise, it got a 5-star review, 3 days in. So someone had actually bothered, despite the fact I hadn't sent out a single press release, someone had bothered to come and review it, and they reviewed it well. And literally, I mean, obviously, I was stoked to get a 5-star review. I was pleasantly surprised that anybody had come to review it in the first place. In hindsight, I was like, fuck, should have sent out some press releases. It just goes to show you never can tell. I would say if you want to enjoy yourself at the fringe, though, that is, do that thing that you want to do, and possibly that is something that we don't place enough merit on in the comedy industry. Sometimes we can be a little bit cynical, we can be a little bit careerist, and we'll be like, oh no, don't do that thing because the industry just won't be into that thing. Fuck them. Do the thing you want to do. No one got into comedy to do stuff they don't want to do. Every once in a while, I have this argument with my agent. I'll be offered some particular gig, and it usually be outside of standard comedy clubs, and I'll just say no. And he's like, but it's really good money. I'm like, I don't care. And he'll like, don't you want the money? And I have to explain to him, if it was always just about the money, I wouldn't have got into stand-up comedy to begin with. I would have done some other job that pays better more consistently.
Oh yeah, it's funny, isn't it? The pay in comedy, like the wages you make in maybe 3 months, a lawyer will probably get in a week or.
I know people who, and you know what? I actually think it's for those who come into comedy from backgrounds where they maybe did have a high-paying day job. I think it's trickiest for them. I knew an act back home who was in a situation where he could have potentially been a full-time stand-up, but he literally was a lawyer as a day job. And he had a wife, kids, family, and a mortgage. And obviously, that solicitor money was much trickier to turn down than some of the day job may have been. On the flip side, I know an act on the circuit who, when people ever say to him, what's the big plan for your career? What do you want to do next? Do you want to get a Netflix special? What do you want to do? His response is always simply, I used to be a welder. And that's all he says. He's just so happy no longer being a welder that if he never goes any further than simply being a full-time comedian, he'll still be really happy he's no longer a welder.
And what about you? No, I'm joking.
I've never been a welder.
Now, with stand-up as a whole and with comedy changing, and what do you see? What do you see? Where do you see comedy going in the next few years? And actually, no, let's change that. What is one thing you'd like to change about comedy if you could?
Oh, one thing I'd like to change about comedy if I could, because your initial question, probably the answer was going to be really big. And now you've asked the question where the answer is going to be really small. If I could change one thing about comedy, I think I would make it compulsory that every booker, every show manager at a comedy club, every agent, every comedy agent has to attempt to do stand-up comedy at least once. Ideally, we make it 3 times, just so they can see things a little bit clearly, a little bit more clearly from the perspective of the comedian. I saw an interesting comment by a pro comedian on Facebook a little while ago. They said, one thing I've learned about stand-up comedy, and X number of years doing stand-up, over a decade in their case, is that comedians really appreciate an MC that is all about making sure the audience is ready for the acts, and bookers don't. And I think there's an element of truth to that. I think that sometimes, particularly when it comes to comperes and MCs, that some bookers simply see whether that MC or that compere is getting big laughs, not whether that MC or compere is actually setting up the room for the acts to succeed in that environment. Sometimes that's not about getting big laughs. Sometimes that's about keeping a lid on the energy in the room so it doesn't get out of hand before an act is brought to the stage. And to help everybody else in the industry have those sorts of insights, like I said, I'll make it compulsory that every act, every agent, every booker, every show manager has attempted a stand-up set at least once.
Yes, that Live Comedy Association, listen up.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they can put that kind of barrier of entry to the market. And don't get me wrong, there's actually quite a few agents out there, quite a few bookers out there that's how they came into the industry. That they their first entrance into the industry was actually starting out at open mic nights, etc., etc. And they may have done comedy for 6 months, sometimes more, before realizing, maybe their own skill set is better utilized off stage. And I do think that there is a benefit to those bookers, those agents, those show managers having had that experience.
Oh yeah, like Adam Rushton's one of them, isn't he?
Adam Rushton was an act for at least a couple of years. I know Rob Riley has, and so Rob still occasionally comperes. Daryl Martin from Just the Tonic. So yeah, there are Lee Martin, Gag Reflex. There's quite a few of them out there that, like I said, have had that experience before utilizing their skills in more of an offstage arena. From my own personal point of view, I think that can only be a benefit.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also a case, I think, sometimes with audiences as well. If they saw what it was like on the other side, I think things may be better as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we often talk about, certain gigs have very comedy savvy audiences, which is, I guess, a fancy word for having seen a lot of comedy usually. And some gigs have much more, I don't want to say naive, because that almost sounds offensive, but audiences that are newer to comedy. Now, one tricky thing there is that those two audiences have to be played in a different way. If you've got a very comedy savvy audience, they understand the nuances, and so you can do certain jokes for that audience that they will pick up on that a newer audience may not. On the flip side, lines that we may see as, and I hesitate to use the word hack, but certainly old school, by the book, a little bit paint by numbers. Obviously, a comedy savvy audience, well, they've probably heard them all before, but a audience that's new to comedy, well, that's all, as I said, that's all new to them. And those audiences usually need to be eased in a little bit. So they actually probably need some comedy, certainly at the top of a show, if we just talk about the night, that is a little bit more by the book. Before they get, before you bring on an act who gets into, trickier areas. Whereas that comedy savvy audience, well, they've seen lots of by the book acts in the past, they're already, prepped for that more nuanced, trickier, boundary pushing style of act. And you can bring that performer straight on. You get an audience that's new to comedy, you bring on that boundary pushing act, and often it's just too much at the top for them. So yeah, like I said, those types of audiences do need to be played in different ways. And again, bookers, agents, show managers hopefully understand that.
Of course. Now, if for anyone that's listening in right now and they want to find out about Sully, and they don't go on Top Boy,
yeah,
how do they find out about you? Do they find out about you on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube?
I float about on social media. SullyO'Sullivan.com is one stop where you can find all the links for my social media. My social media is at Sully something. Because that's usually, it was Sully something. So at Sully something, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook as well. I think I've got a TikTok account. I think it's got a video of me and my cat, with my cat doing tricks. So possibly put more work into TikTok.
So you know what? So if you look for Sully, you'll find it. And what's the name of the cat?
The cat in question is Mr. Bubbles. I did not name the cat. I'm the cat's third human. Basically, one of my neighbors passed away, unfortunately, during lockdown. There was no one to look after the cat. Their family couldn't take the cat. The cat's original human now had a dog. Neighbors on the other side had a dog that really likes cats. Neighbor on the other side of the road, on the upside, he did have a cat, but he also had a dog, so he was kind of catered for his pets. So they all had a meeting I wasn't at and decided that I now had a cat. So that is, how I came to have a cat called Mr. Bubbles. Also, by the way, if you do want to see my fringe show, Idiot's Guide to New Zealand.com, that will take you to tickets for that show, and also the social media links for anything else as well, for the show coming up at Leicester Festival and Glasgow Festival next year, and we're waiting on Brighton dates at the moment.
Right, so guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Make sure you give the podcast review on Amazon or iTunes. And the next guest is going to be the marvellous Colin Higgins, and he's going to talk about how he was punched by a woman at the Edinburgh Fringe and got a black eye. So
I like the fact that you added in at the Edinburgh Fringe on the end of that. I thought we're just bringing on someone who got punched in the face by a woman.
Maybe I should have ended on that, shouldn't I?
Be a different category of podcast.
But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys soon.